Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope that you can hear me. Welcome to today's webinar. It's the beginning or marks the beginning of an online conference which is focused on research practices in the 21st century. We have an exciting program ahead, and today's introductory webinar is aimed at supporting you to take an active and participative role in the 3-day event. So just to give you some background, the 3-day event includes conference speeches by a number of speakers, both from IDS, the University of East Anglia, WHO experts, and this will is being pre-recorded and will be shared with you throughout the day. So day one speakers are mostly from IDS or the UK. And we have prepared resources for you to enable you to engage with their opinion pieces. These will be available to you through YouTube and also as podcasts if you are experiencing low bandwidth. Similarly, we also have provided transcripts as well. So we've really taken a lot of care to ensure that you can engage both with the conference speeches prior to joining the online discussion, which will be held on WHO HIFA and WHO HIFA-Fr. Now, before we move on to the conference speeches for today, and before I explain in more detail about days 2 and 3, which are slightly different, I'd like to just introduce you to the platforms, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague in a moment. But while we're running this webinar, I just want to explain that you are welcome to raise your hand at any point to ask questions, and you will see that there is a little hand that you can raise on the interface. And my colleague will speak about that in more detail shortly. And we welcome your questions, in particular in relation to how this event will run and any other technical issues that you would like to us to clarify. And my Skype is just closing there, so please do accept my apologies. So handing over to my colleague Valentina Catan. She is technical support for this learning event. I'm wondering, Valentina, whether you could come in and just explain how to find the resources and a little bit about the online discussion platform that we will be using over the next 2 days. Over to you, Valentina.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. And I would need to ask you, Siobhan, to allow me to share my screen, if you can make me presenter, so I can show the learning platform that we're going to use. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, so you will be shortly sent, if you already, if you haven't received yet, an email from HIFA as well as from us that will provide you with the links that I'm showing you right now. During the 3 days of our online conference, we will be posting the resources and presentation on the site that you can see here. It's a Google site, and you will be sent via email the link to the main page that you can see here, Researchers of the Future, where you will find all the topics related to the 3 days of our online conference, as well as very useful information concerning the registration. During the 3 days, you will be able to watch pre-recorded presentation, as Siobhan just mentioned, that are posted on this site, as well as join the email-based online discussion, which will happen via email, and you can find additional information here in the main page. So just to recap, you will be sent via email the link to this main page, Researchers of the Future, and you will have a chance to go through the the information related to the conference. So as for day one, you will be able to access day one from both the sidebar that you can see here on the side, day one, how has research shifted in practice over time, as well as from the horizontal toolbar, Researchers of the Future, day one. So from whichever way, you will be able to access this page where you find information on day one, the topics of day one, a profile of the conference speakers, as you can see here. And from this page, you will be able to access all the resources of the 3-day by clicking on conference speeches. As you can see here, this is another page where you find the playlist of the pre-recorded presentations for day one. So just by clicking on the embedded video, you will be able to watch all the 9 presentations that are included in the same playlist. In addition to that, you can also have a podcast version of this presentation just below the video, as you can see here. And you can access the podcast just by clicking on each of them, and you will be asked to download the podcast. Or you might be able to just play it. As you can see here, once you click on play, you will be asked to download it. Finally, you also have a full transcript of the conference speeches that you can access from the file attached at the bottom of this page, as well as by clicking on the hyperlink. So once again, you will receive an email from HIFA with a link to the page that I'm showing you right now, Researchers of the Future, with all the information related to the 3-day conference. For today, you can easily access day one from the sidebar or the horizontal toolbar, and you will be able to find the topics of day one, as well as the profile of the speakers and the conference resources on the top of the page by clicking on the page Conference Speeches. Make sure you click on the playlist video to watch all the 9 pre-recorded presentations that you can also access in different modalities as podcast and transcript. So I think this covers the 3 days. Of course, I'm focusing on day one because this is our first day, but as you can see, you can already access day 2 from the site with the information on topic for day 2, as well as again the profile of the speakers for day 2, as well as day 3. All the resources of the 3-day conference will be found on the page Conference Speeches. Right now you can only see day 1 for obvious reason, but all the resources will be on this page. I hope this can help, and if you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand. You can see the icon of a small hand on your pane.
Oh, thank you, Valentina. It's very helpful to run through the pre-recorded resources that help you to engage with the ideas of scholars based here at IDS and the University of East Anglia, but more importantly helps you to identify some of the key themes that will emerge, no doubt, in the discussion over the next 3 days, and in particular for today, as today's topic is how has research shifted in practice. So we have 9 speakers today, including Professor Mark Hepworth, and we hope that you engage with the preliminary pre-recorded materials as a way of enabling you to get a sense, as I say, of the scope of the discussion for today. Now, I just want to highlight that these are all pre-recorded resources, and as I say, designed to help you understand the breadth of the conversation, the scope and the depth of the conversation that we will cover today under the research theme, research topic, how has research shifted in practice? However, the online discussion itself will take place in the HIFA, FR and HIFA platforms, which are hosted by our partner WHO, that's the World Health Organization. Now, as attendees to this conference, you should have already received an email inviting you to the group. But what will happen is that you will receive subsequent emails enabling you to participate in the discussion. Now, how do you do that? The best way to do it, and I wonder if you could do me a favor, Valentina, and show the inaugural introductory email for us so I can explain how to participate in the email discussion. But what you'll need to do is wait for those emails to arrive from the HIFA platform, and then because this is an email thread, you respond to the emails from your email software. So if you're using it, Outlook or any other email tools, you wait for the email to arrive and you respond to that email. Now, we have been overwhelmed by the number of registrations for this event. It's exceeded 200 people. I'm really hoping that the volume of emails will be manageable, but please be aware that while the discussion is going on, you may receive a higher number of emails than you would ordinarily. And this is because the discussion, the online discussion, is taking place in email, and that's how people contribute and also see others' contributions. Now, there are ways that you can change your settings so that you only receive a digest for the day, but that will mean that you cannot participate in the discussion in real time. So you may want to discuss with the Aura program team how best to set your settings so that it doesn't overwhelm your inbox, but please do be aware that that could be the case. You will receive an email and you may need to check your spam filters from the HIFA2015.org emailing list. And our colleague here, Valentina, has just highlighted the email that you should receive. So if you are not receiving the emails, please do check your spam filters. It may well have been moved to the spam inbox. And if you have any problems, please do get in touch directly with the Aura team. Now, I'm going to put an email in the chat pane. You can email us directly at aura@ids.ac.uk, and we will deal with your inquiries immediately. So we really want you to be involved in this discussion in HIFA, but as I say, it's an email discussion. There may well be an influx of emails as a result, and you may want to change your settings to manage the flow of emails coming in, as I'm sure you have other things you need to do today, not just focus on this event. So before we move on to discuss some of the themes emerging in this event, I would like to invite individuals to ask a question that relates to the technical platforms. So if you have a question specifically that relates to the platforms, please raise your hand now and we will respond to your question. So I see a question coming in from Maria. I'm about to unmute you, so I hope that you can address your question in person. Let's try that first. So, Maria, you are muted. Please go ahead and speak now. Hi, Maria. You are welcome to speak now if you like. I've unmuted you, so you're more than welcome to speak if you have a microphone. If you don't, could I ask you to type your question in the quick questions box or the chat box, and we will address your concern there. Are there any others who would like to highlight a question that relates to the technical platforms? And I'll wait for your question to come in, Maria. Okay, well, it would seem that there are no specific questions related to the technical platform. As I say, you can address direct questions to aura at ids.ac.uk, and we will respond and ensure that you are able to participate in today's discussion. Now, what's the discussion about? I'm sure you're very excited to find out. We really do have a few days of very stimulating and informative discussions. Valentina, can I ask you to switch over to me now so I can begin the presentation with Professor Mark Hepworth? Okay.
You can now, Siobhan.
Thank you very much. So, I hope you can see my screen. If there's a problem, do please let me know. Now, we seem to have a problem with Professor Mark Hepworth. Please excuse me. Is there any way that the technical team can bring him in before we move on? Thank you. So we have I'm just going to go through the schedule for today. Actually, before I do that, I can say, is this information available all the time from today or only during the seminar hours? Great question, Maria. The resources are available through Creative Commons from today onwards, and they will be available for you to use in your own teaching environments, but more importantly, to go back to and refer to over time. So these resources are now public. They're available to you from this day forward. And as Valentina mentioned, we will be releasing content each day. There's quite a lot of content to cover, and so we don't want to overwhelm you with everything on one day. So we will release content each day, and that will be in the public domain forever. Now, I hope that answered your question, Emiria. Let's move on now to the presentations, and I want to just give you a quick snapshot of some of the discussion that will unfold today, in particular focusing on the conference speakers. And I'm going to show you the flow of the presentations, which are available, as Valentina says, as YouTube videos, podcasts, and in a transcript. Now, the event will kickstart with an opening address by Professor Mark Hepworth. He is a consortium partner of the Aura program, and he will introduce the event, highlighting what the Aura program is and our partnership with WHO. But for those of you that would like to know now, Aura is a 3-year program that aims to work with 9 universities in sub-Saharan Africa to strengthen both their research and teaching practices. So this is a particularly timely and relevant event for our learning partners, but more importantly, we are very keen to broaden our scope and in our network, should I say, and include the voices of partners who are beyond the Aura program itself. And this is the first of many regional events that we will run during the lifespan of the program. So the program discussion for today is Researchers of the Future, 21st Century Approaches to Effective Global Research, and How Has Research Shifted in Practice? Professor Mark Hepworth will provide the opening address, and then we move to a conference speaker, Jerry Bloom, the Institute of Development Studies. Now, he's an individual that is a medical doctor who's also working now in research as a research fellow within the Institute of Development Studies. Now, let's have a look at some of the areas that have come out in his discussion. This gives you just a flavour of his piece, which lasts about 7 minutes. Mark, are you with us now? I can hear some ruffling in the background.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. I'm wondering whether you could share your views on Jerry Bloom's piece, his speech, please.
Sure. I can talk through each in turn. Is that the best way to go ahead?
Yes, you can, and I'll help you by introducing the speaker as we move along.
Okay. As Siobhan, first of all, I say hi, hello, and welcome to whoever is out there. Essentially, we conducted some interviews with some experts in the UK and tried to fathom their views on how research has been changing and what are the key things that seem to be emerging and what implications may these have for researchers. Jerry Bloom, who comes from a health background, he highlighted the context, the nature of the context that people are now dealing with. We're seeing rapid change, we're seeing multiple interconnected changes, and also seeing from various countries around the world rising expectations of people with regard to health provision. Jerry went on to, and I think this is echoed by the other speakers, emphasizing the need to spend time actually understanding problems, emergent problems on the ground with people experiencing those problems, including policymakers, the public, and so on and so forth. So a lot of emphasis on actually getting to grips with the problem itself. And then working in a slightly different way to what the way we've worked in the past, to, in a sense, take a much more experimental approach, learning through doing, or perhaps what some people might call action research. So again, not necessarily having a solution up front, but actually having understood the problem, trying out various approaches, and then, very importantly, learning from those lessons, and then scaling up the intervention from there. One other feature he identified or highlighted is that taking this kind of approach necessitates building strong partnerships with a whole range of stakeholders, including policymakers, researchers, people experiencing the situation, and so on. So, just to conclude on Jerry, basically he is seeing research as very much a part of a learning process.
Thank you, Mark. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting about Jerry's discussion is his emphasis on a rapidly changing society and the need for us to embrace complexity. And he's also sharing his experiences from research undertaken both in China and Bangladesh. So this should be particularly relevant for those that are interested in understanding how about programs of research or activities of research that could be adapted, or approaches that could be adapted in their context. So thank you, Mark. Let's move on now to the next speaker, who will be Shandana Mohmans from the Institute of Development Studies, also a research fellow from the governance cluster. So let's have a look at some of the areas that emerged in her presentation.
Okay, shall I dive in there?
Yes, please do.
I should say at this point is there's likely to be a bit of repetition because I think common themes have evolved out of these different speakers. Again, Shandana emphasized the importance of orientation, trying to get a sense of how people approach a specific issue or problem. She also talked about the use of a broad range of techniques and being able to draw on different methods and techniques depending on the situation and applying as I say, different techniques for different purposes, which obviously has implications for the knowledge of the researcher in terms of being familiar or at least knowledgeable of or know about a broad range of methods and techniques that span disciplinary boundaries. So, in essence, she was saying that we need to be more open in our approach, more holistic in how we approach problems, applying mixed methods, and part of that application of mixed methods is to become more collaborative with other researchers and other people in our research landscape. Okay.
Yeah, I find that particularly encouraging about Shandana's message. That's one of her key messages that came out, that we need to perhaps work in a different way, cross disciplines, but more importantly, she gives a lovely description of how to use different methods to understand complex problems. So I hope you enjoyed that speech. Moving on now, we will then move on to the next speaker, who will be Jethro Pettit. He's the IDS Director of Teaching and Learning, so very useful to have his engagement with this conference. I'm sorry, I noticed that we are experiencing problems with our screen. It's involuntarily changing me from the slides to go to webinar, so please excuse the problems with the technicalities. But over to you, Mark. Perhaps you could introduce some of the themes that emerged from Jethro's discussion.
Sure. I mean, Jethro, and I should say that the majority of the people who have been talking or given presentations are very much concerned with society, policy change, that kind of area, and to some extent their views reflect that particular research remit. So if you're coming from a very highly specialized scientific environment, some of these comments may not apply. However, I think that is a question that it would be good to hear from people out there in terms of what they think or what you think. But Jethro, he talked about a specific project to do with strengthening civil society, again emphasized the need to understand the experience of the citizen, people on the ground. He also emphasized the need to be more liberal in a sense in terms of the approaches, the techniques we may use. And he cited a particular technique that was new for him, which included embedding the researcher in the community, actually living in the community, what was called reality check. So again, we're seeing an emphasis on the researcher having a broad toolkit, in a sense, of techniques that they should or could draw on. The other thing that Jethro highlighted is that research increasingly seems to be becoming more longitudinal, taking place over a longer period of time. And we are seeing funders becoming more comfortable, to some extent, more comfortable with this longer time frame. And I would argue, in a sense, becoming more realistic. If you are trying to really understand the situation and then move into applying and trying out different methods and learning from that, then these things take time. Again, Jethro emphasizes the point that learning from research must be embedded within that research. So what he means by that is that the researcher needs to communicate while they're undertaking research, not as traditionally perhaps was the case, save it all up for a journal publication. So increasingly, we're seeing researchers using social media, for example, and Peter Heltzinger will later on refer to that in his presentation, using various media to make sure that we're communicating the learning that stems from research throughout the research process. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And Jethro's example of reality check approach, well, has been drawing on experiences both in Africa, Asia and Latin America. So it should be of interest to a very broad audience. So let's move on then, just to explain that in the playlist on YouTube, there'll be a conference discussion or debate between the first three speakers. So that will be Jerry Bloom, Shandana Mohammad, and Jethro Pettit. And you are welcome to engage with that debate as it brings out, it begins to expand on some of the areas that have been elicited through the presentations. So should be quite an interesting space from which to explore some of the ideas that Mark's introduced you to. And then moving on from there, we will have another speaker. Her name is Laura Camfield from the University of East Anglia. Now, before we move on to the content of her presentation, I should just say that her presentation will be delivered in two parts. The first part today will focus on the conference theme, how has research shifted in practice? And she also provided some inputs that will enable us to respond to day three's topic of discussion, which looks more at how, what are the implications for strengthening capacity and what kinds of capabilities will a contemporary researcher need to foster in this new or newer research environment. So her presentation has been divided over those 2 days and will be available as a YouTube video on both of those days. So moving now to the content that's covered on day one. Mark, would you like to comment on that, please?
Sure. Again, we're looking at, or this particular speaker, Laura, is again highlighting the complex nature of the problems that we're dealing with. She implies in her talk that some of the, what's the expression, low-hanging fruit has perhaps been picked, and we're now in a situation where we are dealing, particularly with areas that involve social change, with far more complex problems. And partly a consequence of that, she argues, has been a move to multidisciplinary research. The point, however, she makes there, which perhaps is in slight contrast to our other speakers, but maybe not so. Um, she's making the point that this is not just people getting access to a wider toolkit in terms of research methods, techniques, although that, as we've heard, is important. But she's making the point that we shouldn't lose, to some extent, the strengths, the disciplinary strengths, which may include how they perceive the world, how they perceive other people perceive the world, and so on, that we should not lose these distinctions. And to some extent, she's arguing that it, in fact, is useful for different disciplines to work together on a project, for example, a common problem, but also scrutinize each other in terms of what people are doing, how they're approaching problems, and so on and so forth. Again, this idea of flexibility, adaptivity of the researcher is coming through from Laura's presentation. And as Siobhan has noted, additional comments are made by Laura that relate more to day 3, and we will hear those later. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. For those of you who are interested in a description of what multi, inter, post, transdisciplinarity means, Laura provides a really interesting and informative, I think quite detailed description at the beginning of her presentation. So she covers the theory, and she also includes her own experiences, in particular of 2 large programs of research that she's undertaken in various parts of the world. So very interesting. Thank you, Laura. Moving on then to our final speaker for day 1, Peter Hautziger is a political scientist from the Institute of Development Studies, and he will provide the final individual presentation for day 1. Mark, would you like to introduce his presentation, please?
Sure. Peter, who has many years of training people in research methods and techniques, added some important points, and also corroborated or reinforced some of the other speakers' comments. Again, Peter's emphasizing the need for understanding what he calls descriptive analysis, in other words, understanding the situation, understanding the context. I mean, it has struck me that this openness to appreciating and understanding of context is, okay, it may not be new entirely, however, it does have implications for research design and how much time you allow for different aspects of research. It also has implications for perhaps the uncertainty of the research, and I can't help thinking that that may sit uncomfortably with funders, with sponsors, but maybe that's something that people could debate in the discussion. Having gone through that kind of descriptive stage, she then talks about moving into more a process whereby you're looking at causality, dependencies, how one thing affects another, and lastly, this desire, in a sense, to generalize beyond the particular. So these would be associated with very different techniques and methods and so on and so forth. I think again, yeah, sorry, Siobhan, I think again he's emphasizing how complex things are and how, for example, people's motivation and the communities they belong to are all having significant impact. So discrete interventions that ignore people's motivations, ignore their community, are likely to fail. Again, a need to use different methods. And Peter makes this last and I think very important point, and also highly relevant to the discussion on day 3, is that researchers need to embrace the digital technologies that can enable them both to gather data, analyze data, and also communicate their findings using appropriate methods to the appropriate audience. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. It's a very detailed analysis of Peter's contribution to the discussion today. And it will move into a debate between yourself and him, elaborating again on some of the key issues that he raised in his presentation. Now, earlier on in today's transmission, Mark alluded to the fact that and I'll move on to the key question actually, as I think we've got quite a good summary here and we may want to move back to that in a moment. But Mark alluded to the fact that many of the speakers today do work in a policy-related environment or policy-influencing environment. It may be very different to your own. So at the end of the videos, we've posed what we're calling a key question. And perhaps you'd like to talk a bit about that, Mark, in relation to today's debate and encouraging others to share their views.
Okay, thank you, Siobhan. Yes. An appreciation of complexity, a greater emphasis on impact. I know from my experience at Loughborough University and being involved in REF, our Research Excellence Assessment process, that impact is key. We have to demonstrate and show our impact, our societal impact. Now, understanding context and working closely with our partners, our respondents, the policymakers, etc., is more likely to lead to impact. However, the question is, I think, or a doubt I have, perhaps, again, I'm very keen to hear what people think, is that if one is working in a sort of what's called a hard science, a material science, are these issues relevant? Does it matter? Are you still concerned with impact? Do you still have to communicate or put great effort into communicating what one's doing while one's doing research and the outcome of the research? Should all research actually have some kind of social justification in a sense? Now, while I say that, I'm hearing the voice of colleagues saying, well, what about blue sky research? What about research that has no immediate foreseeable impact? We're just grinding away at a particular issue, a particular problem. Is that a problem? So I think that's where I'm coming from in terms of that particular question. How much are the comments of Jasper, Shandana, Joey, Peter, Laura, etc. very specific to the policy environment? Or are we seeing the focus on impact, the focus on making a difference, what I've heard Siobhan called the so what factor, does that cut across all our disciplines, all our research? And hence that's the background to that question.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, because we do recognise that researchers are coming from different contexts, and tomorrow we'll be hearing the views specifically of WHO experts, and I imagine they'll have their own views, although I hope that some of the emerging themes will be shared. And from our previous discussions with the convener, Isabel Waxsmith at WHO HIFA, she says that many of the themes that have emerged from the presentations you'll view today are also echoed by her colleagues at WHO. So looking at the key summary themes, these are areas that you will engage with, and please do challenge them if you, as Mark says, this is not relevant to your discipline. Let's figure out to what extent researchers' capabilities or practices need to adjust, as Mark says, to deal with the more complex problems that we are finding in development now. So we're about to close the webinar. We've gone through the presentations that you will engage with, or you are invited to engage with today. I'm imagining that individuals have final questions before we close. We've got about 9 minutes for questions, so please do raise your hands. And while I wait for individuals to share their final reflections or comments, questions, I'll just highlight that day 3 is a live webinar like this. We have a link which will be available for individuals to join. There's a limit of 1,000 places, so there should be enough spaces for everyone to participate. We have some interesting presentations, live presentations, from one from our Aura Consortium partner, ITOCA, about the Research for Life programs. We also have presentations from Enrique Mendezabal on think tanks. INASP are also participating in this webinar, as are BLDS, which is the British Library for Development Studies at IDS. And as I've mentioned earlier, Laura Camfield's second part to her presentation will be available then. We also do have 2 other presentations by Linda Waldman and Sophie Marsden that look specifically at providing capacity development for researchers in research methods and practices, and the ways that you can use technology to deliver those interventions. Some of the tips, practical tips from the field of educational technology. So it should be very interesting. You will be required to sign up, as you have done today, for the webinar, and we will send out the link so that you can do that in good time. Now, it's been very good to see you all here today. I hope that you found this webinar informative, and I look forward to seeing you now in the HIFA platform. It's available in 2 languages, so please do select the language that you prefer. Go to the HIFA platform or respond to their emails if you prefer to participate in the discussion in English. Otherwise, you are welcome to join HIFA-Fr. And again, you can email aura at ids.aec.uk if you are experiencing any problems. I can see that there are no more questions from the floor. So at this point, I would like to thank you for your participation and look forward to seeing you in the online space. The beauty of online discussions is that you can participate at a time that suits you. So please don't feel as though you have to respond right away. Let's get the discussion moving, engage with some of the discussion points, and then please do share your views as the discussion proceeds. So thank you, Professor Mark Hepworth, for introducing the presentations today, and Valentina for sharing details about the learning management system and where you can find the resources. And I should have introduced myself at the beginning. I'm Siobhan Duvino and I'm the Aura Program Manager, and I welcome you to this online learning conference which will run from today for 3 days. Thank you to you all and goodbye.